Hello there. We have somebody joining us today that's been waiting a long time since last May, and this is Mike coming to us from Iowa City, Iowa. Welcome.
Hey, thanks
Hey,
for having
Mike,
me on.
you're
Hey,
not too
thank you.
far away from me.
I know you were mentioning a snowstorm, and I was like, I don't think we're going to get one, which is cool.
We're
Which is cool.
coming any minute. Snow, sleet, ice, 9 yards.
I don't, I don't need it. Nope.
No, nope, nope, nope. So,
So you're from Iowa and you
Yeah.
were born in Iowa. Tell us how you want to tell your story.
Okay. So I was born in 1970 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I was given up for adoption at birth. I was adopted at 10 days old by a couple who had fertility issues, from what I'm
Mm-hmm.
told. Um, when I went home with them after 10 days, I guess I had some kind of a medical issue, and I ended up, my mom always told this story about how I was in a oxygen tent for a long time after that. So um, I don't think I got to have a lot of personal contact when I was really little. So that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I don't know if that formed me at all, but it was kind of an interesting thing that happened after your birth.
It's like a double whammy, adopted and no
Hmm.
contact.
Yeah. Um,
did they
I
have
mean,
other kids prior to you?
no, no other kids. Um, and then at the age of two, my dad passed away.
Mm,
He was he worked nights. He was like a supervisor at a factory or something like that. And he was driving home, and they think he fell asleep and drove off the road
mm.
and passed away.
Oh, geez.
So that
So you
made
didn't really know him.
no, I don't have a memory of him. There's
Wow.
pictures of us together, but I don't have any memory of him. After that, I think things got really hard for my mom. Um,
Yeah.
and so um, it was an interesting time. I think so. I always knew I was adopted. That was something that she always told me. It was never a thing that was like I found out at some point. I knew from the beginning. My mom was sort of a big personality. She liked to be the center of attention, and she was like she told tons of jokes and swore like a sailor, and um, so she would have me come out and tell the story about being adopted and stuff. It was sort of, it felt like, looking back, it was very performative, you know?
But I was just
Yeah.
gonna say like a show pony.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it was like.
That's a
And I
little
don't,
weird. Yeah.
it was, yeah, it was, looking back, I mean, it's uncomfortable to think about, but I mean, she was very proud of the fact that I was adopted. She was proud of the fact that she adopted me. Um, but like in private, like we never spoke about it. She didn't want to talk about it at all.
Really?
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
were you close? Like, did she, after your father died, kind of turn her attention towards you, or?
I would say that she very much wanted to be close with me, and I just never, like, I love her. I loved her. I always have. She's like very important to me. Um, but I never felt connected to her.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm very protective of her. I think she was a very important person in my life, but like, I just never felt the connection like,
Yeah.
I would guess you would with your parents.
Yeah.
Um, so I basically went through my youth not being able to discuss being adopted with her, but like her proudly telling everybody that I was adopted.
That's all so confusing. Weird. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to
So
mention like lonely, right? Like a
it was
odd
very
kind of,
strange. Yeah,
yeah, it does
yeah.
seem. What did she do for a living? Like to how did she survive after your dad died?
So she remarried a few years later, and so she basically, for the most part, she was stay at home.
Mm-hmm.
She did some like she'd like work in kitchens and stuff like that, but for the most part, she stayed at home. I don't think she.
And was your stepfather a decent guy, or was that
He was really good to me. He was
okay,
not.
good.
They weren't great together, and I don't think they especially enjoyed each other that much. But he was always very good to me. So for about 10 years, from about the age of 4 till about 14, they were married. Um, and then they got divorced. But yeah, he was great to me. He was always, I mean, I think I learned a lot about being a parent from him. So that was
That's
good.
nice. Yeah.
Um, Sort of fast forward to like when anything happens adoption wise. In my early 20s, I got a book from like a local bookstore that was about, it was like called, I think it was called the Adoption Resource Guide or something like that. And basically it was like this book that just told you how to search for your adoptive or for your biological parents.
So that
Why
was
did
like
you get, yeah.
1990. Is that what you said? Like when you were 20?
Yeah, early 90s, yeah.
Mm.
Why did you get the book? Like,
I
did
mean,
it pop out
I
at the shelf for you, or you're like, oh, I'm gonna look for this?
I should tell you that like I've always felt the urge to look. I've always
Okay.
felt the urge to know. I've
Yeah.
never felt like people talk about coming out of the fog. I don't know that I was ever in the fog. I've like
Right. Well, and
never,
your circumstances maybe dictated
Yeah.
the
yeah,
weirdness of
yeah,
performing monkey and
yeah,
then you can't talk about it. It's gonna leave a hole and for
yeah.
you.
Right. So I was just always curious, and I think I want to say it did just pop out at me. I think it was I was at the bookstore and it was
Yeah.
there, and I was like, oh, that's kind of what I'm interested in. A resource to be able to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
And so this was like pre-internet, so it was stuff like looking on at microfiche
Right.
of like newspaper articles and stuff like that.
I just forgot what I was going to ask you. Sorry. Go on. I will
Yeah.
edit that.
Yeah. So I was adopted through Catholic Charities. And so that in that book, it kind of just explains, you should go to where you're adopted and get your non-identifying information and start that process. So I did that. That cost $25, which I thought was, I mean, frustrating because I was a young person with no money, and even $25 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they gave me a copy of a piece of paper. I sincerely doubt it cost them $25 to do that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Had you been told anything, any non-identifying information, how you
so my
came to be adopted, anything like that?
my mom would share information like she would always say that my biological dad was 100% Swedish. That's what she'd say. I don't know what that means. Um, and she would say that my biological mom was a cosmetologist and she was short with red hair.
She had
Well,
these random things. I had those
yeah,
random things. That's so odd.
yeah.
Okay, go on.
And my dad was tall. So the interesting thing was is my adopted mom was short with red hair, and my adopted dad was tall. So
Uh,
like when people imagine who their biological parents are, I never imagined somebody famous. I just was like, oh, they're kind of like these people, I think, very
like
similar.
kind of like these people.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Um, So I got the non-identifying information, and basically that's what it said. It said she was 5'2", she had red hair, she was a cosmetologist. It said her religion, um, Presbyterian, I think. It said she had a brother and a sister, and then for him it just said that he was 6'2", um, and Swedish. So my mom must have gotten that non-identifying information, I
Yeah,
guess.
sounds like it.
Yeah. So that's all the information that was in there. Um, so the folks at Catholic Charities, the lady that I worked with was super nice, as helpful as she could be, I think, considering, it's her job, so she has to follow rules. So she basically told me to go to the county courthouse and contact them to see if I could look at my records. She's like, that'll be your first step. So I went and did that. And like a judge opened, I went one day just randomly and a judge agreed to see me. He got my file out. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it was wild. I didn't know what I was doing. And so he got my file out. And I literally watched him unseal it. He opened it up, read it in front of
Um,
me, and then said, sorry, I can't share anything
oh
with
my
you. And
God,
that was
isn't
it.
that weird?
I know I
That's
just in retrospect is I'm like 22 or whatever. I'm like I should have just stolen it out of his hand and ran out of the building, but
Yeah.
um
Clock him
so
on the head, grab the folder,
yeah,
head out.
it,
right,
it
yeah,
still just blows my mind that someone has your information unsealed right in front of you. Oh, sorry. Because
hmm
22, you're an adult. I mean,
yeah,
you had
yeah,
some 14-year-old in front of him. Yeah.
yeah, it was wild. So that was really frustrating, and
Mhm.
so like a lot of this stuff, like, and you guys probably are familiar with it, but it's like a lot of high activity trying to do something and then like long time waiting for the next
Mm-hmm.
thing. So I went back to the lady from Catholic Charities and basically explained to her that, what happened. And she's like, well, we have this, we can do a one-time search. And she's like, we can't guarantee anything will happen, but we can do a search. It costs $250 or
Oh,
whatever it was. And so I'd been dating my wife at that point, and she basically took her income tax return check and paid for that to happen. So that was she was fully invested too. So um uh so sh- we had this thing done, this investigation done, and they found her and they contacted her. Um, and she basically just freaked out and she was like, she didn't know what to do. And so basically they agreed that she would call them back when she was ready. She said she wasn't sure what she wanted to do, but she would call them back and let them know the next step. And so uh, the lady told me that from Catholic Charities. Um, and then she just never called them back.
ever.
Never, no. So the lady from the cat from Catholic Charities, probably 2 years later or whatever, she's like, if I was you, I would post in the local newspaper that you are searching on your birthday. And I was like, that's weird. Well, and so,
So she
um,
knew it was local.
yeah,
Hmm.
So
that's what
she was
that
giving
was
you a
the hint
code. Yeah.
she was giving me. Yeah.
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 Um, so I didn't do that because that seemed weird and didn't make a lot of sense to me. But over the years, we did a lot of searching on message boards and things like that. And because back then, so Iowa recently opened their
Hmm.
adoption records, but like that was like 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Before that, everything was closed. So nothing was available, but we did some searching on message boards and found. Um, I was born in Lynn County, and we found that Lynn County in Iowa kept their own birth records as
Mm.
opposed to like state birth records. The county actually kept them in like in these big leather bound books. Um, and we were able to go to the genealogy society and leaf through this thing and search for, and it would have your birth date and then it would have a name. So likely there weren't tons of people born on that date. Um, at the, or at least it would narrow it down to a few names or whatever. Um, so we went through the book, and I was born in early July of 1970, and we're going through the book, and we go June 30th, turn the page, and it's blank. They stopped keeping track on June 30th,
Oh,
1970.
what?
Are you
Oh, no.
serious?
Pretty wild. So it
That is so frustrating.
must have been their fiscal year end or something. I don't
Right.
know,
That
but
is June 30th is the end of the fiscal year.
yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
So obviously that was really frustrating, but we just kept moving forward with like
and at this point, so Catholic Charities they said we can only do one search. So that was a dead end road at that point. You couldn't go back to them.
correct. No, the lady did say I could write a letter, and I was like, okay, I'll write a letter. And what I thought that meant is I could write a letter, they would deliver the letter. And I waited years, never heard anything, and called them back one time, and the lady that I worked with was gone. And so I was talking to some other lady. She's like, "Oh, yeah, I have the letter right here." I'm like, "So it never went anywhere. It just went to you guys? Like, what's the point of that?"
you
But
don't mail it to her?
yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't know. It's wild, but
Oh my gosh.
in this timeline, so we're up to about 2015 now, and I did ancestry DNA.
Oh my
Hmm.
gosh. It's been so many years since 25 years then
Yeah,
you had to
And how
wait. Oh
frustrating.
my gosh.
yeah. So I did ancestry DNA in 2015. Um, Nothing really came from that either. At the time it was just there's info out there, but it's like I have third cousins or whatever, and I didn't know what to do with that information. Um, and then in 2017, my adopted mom died. And
Oh.
then I became, I mean, I always
Yeah.
was aggressively trying to find something, but like this, I don't know, I don't know if it sparked something, but I was just like, so I started joining like Facebook groups and things like
Mhm.
that. And there was one for Iowa adoptees, and they started, and in there they talk about search angels and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, that might be an interesting option. But at the same time, my wife and I sat down with the family trees that we'd created in Ancestry, and had like whiteboards, and we're like doing, connecting all the yarn and all that stuff. And uh, we we found a family that we thought looked like it would fit with with my biological mom. And but there was like a couple things that didn't match. Like she didn't have a brother and a sister like the um
Oh.
uh whatever non-identifying information said. She just had a brother. Um, she had a son who was older than me. So I'm like, oh, that doesn't quite match, but everything else looked like it matched. So we get this search angel, or I go through the Facebook group and I get a search angel, and she starts looking. And about a week later, she's like, you should contact these people who are on Ancestry who are related to you, who appear to be really into genealogy. Um, so I did, and one of them was a third cousin, and he contacted me back, and he was like really nice and helpful, and he um, he's like, you want to, if you want, we could go out for lunch and have a chat. And I was like, okay. He lived locally, so we went out for lunch, and he brought like a bunch of stuff, and I could tell he knew. My wife beforehand, she's like, he wants to tell you something. He doesn't want to just go out for lunch with you. I'm like, okay. So he brings like a bunch of stuff, and he did. He knew who it was.
He narrowed it down quick.
Oh, he
Yeah, he knew it.
knew.
He knew. And so, but he wouldn't.
And he was a third cousin?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So
Genealogist.
he's a
Yeah. Yeah, you
genealogist.
gotta
So
love those.
yeah. So he knew, but he didn't want, he's like, this is what he said. He goes, here's some information. This should tell you how to figure out who it is. If you can't figure it out through this information, I'll tell you, but I'd prefer you figure it out. And I'm like, okay. So I took it to the search angel, and she figured it out within an hour. And it was that family that we'd narrowed it
Wow.
down to. And so
Pretty
what
smart.
happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened is I did have an older brother. So my mom had given birth to a son a year before she gave birth to me. Um,
What was she married at the time
she
or
was not married, no.
okay. So
She
then
was,
by the time she kept him and then by the time she was pregnant again, it was untenable for her?
yeah. So this is what I learned later. She got pregnant with me and then never told anybody she was pregnant until she went into labor. And
Mm.
she had moved back home with her parents because she couldn't afford to live on her own with her new baby. And so her parents basically said, you can't have two babies in this house. You either have to give this baby up for adoption, or you have to move out of this house.
Wow.
So
No
those were the
support.
circumstances.
No support. Yeah.
Yeah. So those were the circumstances.
How did that make you feel? It feels like you're sad about that. Like you have a brother 1 year older.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sad about it because there's like extending circumstances to that whole thing. Um, he doesn't know I exist.
Oh,
Um, and she, and so after she gave birth to me, she started a relationship with a gentleman. She married him. Um, and then he adopted the older son.
Hmm.
And then he doesn't know that he's adopted. So she doesn't want to tell him about me because then she'll have to tell him that he's adopted.
Uh,
oh my gosh.
So he doesn't know about me.
That poor guy.
All right.
so
And
he,
he's
he has
mid 50s.
a brother out there he doesn't know, and a father that's not his.
Correct.
Oh, nice.
Ah,
Yeah. So after the search angel figures this information out, she or I go home, talk to my wife about it. We discuss it, and we just decide that we know who these people are now, and so we're gonna Facebook message them. So,
but let me quickly ask,
uh,
do you and your brother have the same father?
no,
No.
Okay.
nope. So we go home, we Facebook message the brother, and I have a younger sister, and then my biological mom. So these three people, we message them. Um, so we didn't know anything at this point, like that this was a secret or anything. So um, my sister immediately replies to it, and she's like, confirms everything. She knows the whole story. So she's like 7 years younger than I am, eight
So
years younger than
she
my older
knows,
brother.
but her older brother doesn't know?
Yeah.
Has the mom confided in her?
Yes.
Oh,
Exactly. Yeah. And so her dad is my brother's adopted dad.
yeah. They
If
think they
that's
share the same dad.
correct. Yeah. So she confirmed everything, and you know, basically my mom, she's talking through my mom and getting information from her, and my mom basically is saying she does not want to meet, um but she is willing to sort of answer some questions or whatever. um and then my sister and I end up becoming relatively not close, but like we do a lot of messaging and talking, and we go out for meals together, and it feels pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
um and then the angel um comes up with my biological father's name, and my mom won't confirm, or won't say, she won't tell us who he is. And we're like, will you at least tell us if it is not this person? And then it was him. She
Mm-hmm.
was like, she's like, I don't understand how DNA works. How do you know these things? Like in her head, she's like, how did you guys get my DNA? That's what she said. And it was like, that's not how it works. But when you're in your,
Someone came and stole a glass from your house and
right, I guess when you're in your 70s,
yeah.
you
Does
haven't
does your
thought about.
sister, I have a question. Does your sister, is she close at all to her brother, your brother? Does she feel weird about not including him in this? And
She kind of, I mean, her indication to me is that she's not incredibly close to him.
because he's much older too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an
Mhm.
interesting thing. Um, but yeah, like they don't seem like they are, but like the entire family lives within 2 blocks of each other currently,
Oh.
so they have to be somewhat close. But I mean, as you can tell from this happened years ago, 6 years
Mm-hmm.
ago now, 7 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, and I don't know much about them, so you can probably tell that I don't have like much of a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Um, But then she did confirm that my dad was who we thought he was. She wouldn't tell us his name, but when we told her his name, she was like, "Yeah, that's right." So we go through the same process again with Ancestry and Facebook and start figuring out who I'm related to, and then looking them up and preparing a message to send. And what we found was there's 2 sisters and a brother from my dad, so like halves or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of them was very active on Facebook. One of them seemed very private, and the other one wasn't on Facebook. So we just messaged the really active one because she seemed like her life was, she was very open on Facebook. She seemed to enjoy social media. So we're like,
Mm-hmm.
she seems like the one we'll get the best response out of. Um, what happened was my wife contacted her. She immediately contacted back, and they ended up on the phone together. And my wife is kind of, she's great at like advocating for me. So like I think we thought when we started this process that we would be less alarming to people if she was the one contacting them instead of me. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it worked for in both cases. So um, she ends up talking to the sister, and the sister is not biologically my sister.
Oh.
She is my biological dad's adopted daughter.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. So he
So he adopted kids or kid.
kids actually.
Okay.
What
Wow.
was your parents' relationship?
So turns out they had gone on like 2 dates.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah. Um and so he and then I guess I'll do a little bit of I'll let you know. So he dated my mom a couple times, but he also dated her best friend, like more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that might have been after. It's kind of gray of how that worked, but um, he, so we find out that she's not my biological sister, but I do have two biological sisters from him. And one is this sister's also biological sister. So like a half sister to her.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's getting convoluted, I know. But the other one is a half sister from a different woman. And that different woman, it was my mom's best friend, the one that,
Come on, he's getting around.
well, yeah, I guess he was having a good time back in the 60s, I guess. Um, so yeah, so ends up that I have a sister who's 5 months younger than me, and our moms were best friends, and
Wow.
they actually lived together. Um, and so what happened was, is my mom, when she got pregnant, she just dropped off the face of the earth, and nobody knew what happened to her. She just stopped communicating with people. Back then it was probably way easier. There's no
Right. The
texting
cell
or
phones
email
and
and
all.
all
Right.
that stuff.
Yeah.
So she just disappeared, and nobody knew that she gave birth, really. Um,
So the best friend goes through her pregnancy alone, not knowing your mom's going through that. Interesting.
correct.
Hmm.
Yeah. So the best friend, she gets pregnant, and then she and my dad break up while she's pregnant. And then he ends up marrying, like not too long after, ends up marrying another woman, and then adopts this girl that I was just telling you about, the one who's kind of given us the information.
And other
Adopts her.
children.
So he adopts her, and then and then he and his new wife have a baby together. So that's my other half biological sister. And then they get divorced some years later, and then he gets remarried to a woman who has a kid, and then he adopts that child. And that's a boy.
Hmm.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how to like we all get to, like, currently I we all get together, and like I don't know
So
if,
he was welcoming to you in his life?
so initially, no, like initially, not that he wasn't welcoming to me. He was not welcome to the idea. He was like, there's no way. He's like, I don't remember any of this. I don't know what any of this is. Um, so me, so I'd already done the DNA test. So my biological half sister did it and proved that we were connected. And then we met, and so me and her, and then the other biological half sister, who's with my mom's best friend, or was my mom's best friend, uh, um, we all met at the same time, and that was really neat. They're great people. We spend a lot of time uh, communicating now, going out for meals and stuff.
I love that. I can see it on your face that they mean a lot to you. Just
Oh, they're so
gives you
good.
light
Yeah,
up. Yeah.
yeah, they're good. Yeah, um, yeah. And so we met, and at that point my dad was not interested. He was just like, I don't, he's like, I'm not ready for this. And what I found out later is he's very methodical. He's kind of he doesn't like change.
Mm-hmm.
um so we met, it was great. And then a few weeks later, me and them and an aunt, so like my dad's sister, she's like, yeah, I want on this. So she came and met, and she was amazing. And they have an older sister, and it sounds like the two sisters basically sped the process up for him. They're like, you got to figure this out or move forward with it. And so, I think in his own time, he was like, yeah, you're right. He's like, this is right. So we met, and he's been the best, like so
All the
great.
best.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah,
He-
yeah. We go
And
out
do
to
you
the,
all live close?
yeah.
And where's your birth mother? Is she
She
close?
lives close. Yeah, we all live within a half hour of each
So
other.
you could
so
all run into
I
each
just,
other
yeah.
feasibly at some point.
Yeah, yeah, we could. I mean, back before I spoke to my mom, I knew where she worked. I saw her. It's like she's in her 70s or whatever. She worked at Walmart in the,
You are.
yeah. I walked in and saw her, and I mean, I knew who she was, but I didn't want to meet my mom at Walmart. So
Did you have eye contact with her or anything?
yeah,
You did? Did she know it was you?
no,
No.
no,
Huh.
no.
And
So
there's
interesting.
like a
Yeah.
layer
I'd
of
be stalking too. I
me too.
mean,
Yeah,
I
for
can't,
sure.
like, all
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. So
Wow.
that almost ends the story. I mean, so I met all my dad's side, and they've like been just wonderful. Like we go out to their house every 4th of July for like this big gathering. We go to Christmas every year at their house. We just meet throughout the year, go out to for dinner, and my dad just texts me funny stuff every once in a while. And
Do you
And
feel,
then with your younger sister from your mom, are you still in touch with her?
yeah.
so so that'll wrap up the story really is like so two about 2.5 years ago, I finally kind of had like a little breakthrough with my mom where she was willing to talk to me on the phone. We talked a few times. Um, we decided to meet. She came to my house with my younger sister. It was great. We talked a ton. I would say that it didn't feel um, as great as it did with my dad, which is surprising to me because I was really expecting it to.
Mm-hmm.
She was a little like she was really nice, and she talked a lot, and she told me all kinds of stuff. Um, but then at the end, like she kind of gave me like one of those side hugs, and my sister's like, "So do you guys want to, do you want to keep doing this?" And my mom's like, "Yeah, just give me a call." And so I've called her, I don't know, about a million times since then. She's never picked up the phone, so
Oh,
And still she hasn't told the brother.
I know
no,
I'm thinking about that brother out there.
still hasn't told him.
Poor
Um,
guy.
yeah. So
And
about it,
you can have a relationship.
yeah, exactly. And so the final kind of thing in this whole situation is my sister from her had gone from being like super interactive and fun, and she sort of like got weird. Like
Yeah.
like when we'd I'd text her something and she'd just like, one word responses, or I'd text something and then she would, and then I'd reply and no reply for a month. And it just
Mm,
was always me reaching out. So
That
about a
seems
little over,
so typical with adoptees,
it
right? Like,
does.
yeah, right.
mm,
So a little over a year ago, I just basically said, I want to have a real relationship with you. We can, I'm always going to be available. I'm always interested. I don't have any hard feelings about whatever's happening right now, but whatever we're doing right now doesn't feel real. And it makes me feel bad every time we have an interaction. So
Good for you for saying that.
yeah. And, I don't know, it kind of bums me out because like I
Of
really
course.
enjoy her. But I'm just not interested in sort of this partial relationship. So
No, she's
we just
walking some line with your mom and you, and
That's exactly right. Yeah, she's trying
mhm.
to keep keep my mom happy by not developing this relationship, and so
I
um
have one last question. Before your adoptive mother died, did she know that you were searching
Mm.
and doing all that? Did you still never talk about it? It was just like a dead subject between you?
yeah, she didn't know. I mean, I brought it up to her once when I was like a teenager, and she just cried, and was
Oh,
like,
boy.
I'm sorry, I was not good enough for you,"
Oh,
and all that
I
kind of
gosh,
heard
stuff.
so
I've heard
manipulative.
that's a
Ugh,
line
Yeah,
I've heard. Yeah.
drives me
yeah,
crazy. I can't,
yeah,
that just, ugh.
yeah. So I just never brought it up again.
Mm.
Never. Gosh.
Yeah.
It's lonely.
Wow.
I feel like a loneliness through your thread because you lost the dad who was going to raise you even though he wasn't
Hmm.
your dad.
Hmm.
And all these losses, and then your mom with the come out and say you're adopted, but let's not talk about it. It's all very. And then now there's
Yeah.
still more secrets and lies. That's how this works, right? It's like, come on, people.
Yeah. 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 So
Mm.
that's
Do you
kind
ever
Oh,
of the
think?
beginning to the
one,
end of it.
yeah. Did you stay in touch with your stepfather?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
I did not. Well, at first I did. He moved to a different part of the state. Um, and he's definitely not the kind of guy who would have like a cell phone or like a cell phone or a email address or anything. He was pretty old school. So there was just like I drove up and visited him once, just popped in and we talked and it was great. But like, yeah, aside from that, like it's really far away and there's no real good way to get in touch with him. So
I'm glad he was in your life when he was.
yeah, he was a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. What an interesting story. Really
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing it. And
I feel I feels I it's hard to convey the whole story
Of
but
course.
without using people's names
Right.
and it's so confusing because there's so many like people in different layers. So hopefully it came across
It
correctly.
did.
But
You were very succinct. There, it wasn't super confusing.
I
And
also feel
I'm
like this is when you should watch our YouTube channel because I feel like your face says a lot. Like, you know,
yeah,
you have a
it's
lot of them.
listeners go to YouTube and
Mhm.
so you can see it. Sometimes that, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Really
yeah,
interesting and you told it really well and
thanks.
Nice to meet you.
I appreciate
yeah.
you guys having me on. You've been in my life for a
Oh,
long time now. So every
I
week you're
liked
in my
love
ears.
that.
how you started off by saying, you never needed to come out of the fog. You were out of the fog.
Just boom.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so interesting hearing all the different stories and different
It
places
is.
people are in.
Yeah. And that's one compliment I want to give you guys is like I listen to other podcasts about adoption and you guys are very um open to everybody and the way they feel about stuff.
Yeah.
Like I listen to some other ones and it's like if you don't militantly feel a certain way, I almost feel like I'm being pushed out of that group. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it can
Listen,
be.
every adoptee has their story and their story is all different. We're all different.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of our mission, just have a place for anybody can come tell their story and feel safe no matter where they are in their
Mhm.
process. So,
I appreciate it.
yeah, we appreciate you.
We
Really,
do.
Thank you.
gives
Yeah.
us a lot to hear the stories. So,
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike.
thank you.
Yeah. I will
So
talk
Please
great
to
to
you
stay in
meet
guys.
you.
touch if something
Yeah.
changes,
Yeah, I will
Yeah.
for sure.
especially with
Looking
that
forward to talking to
brother.
you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right.
Mike.
Yep.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.